dan beberapa hal lain, misalkan eh, pohon apple-nya Newton itu memang beneran ada dan eh, di dep- eh, dan bisa dijumpai hingga sekarang. Ini foto keluarga eh, saya di depan pohon apple Newton. Nah, selain riset, saya juga melakukan beberapa aktivitas non penelitian. Saya praktisi martial arts, terutama pencak silat. Saya memiliki klub pencak silat di situ. Tapi yang ingin saya emphasize untuk hari ini adalah ternyata saya mendapatkan beberapa wisdom tentang nanoteknologi dari pencak silat, dari martial art. Kalau di pencak silat ada teknik bawah. Jadi misalkan seorang praktisi pencak silat biasanya bedanya dengan bela diri lain, em, pesilat eh, ak- eh, akan menyerang di bagian-bagian tubuh yang tidak tersangka, di bawah, di kaki, melakukan teknik sweep dan lain-lain. Nah, ini seperti halnya di nanoteknologi. Eh, se, eh, Mungkin udah terkenal sekali ya wisdom talk dari Richard Feynman. There is plenty of room at the bottom. Banyak sekali opportunity eh, di skala bawah, di skala atomik dalam eh, em, dalam konteks nanoteknologi. Oke, eh, karena saya siapkan presentasi teknikalnya dalam bahasa Inggris, saya akan izin menggunakan bahasa Inggris. Jadi, first, for today, I will present background of this problem, novel semiconductor nanostructures for silicon photonics, why we need short wave infrared in particular on silicon at the first place, and then I will introduce a couple of possible alternative that we've been pursuing for the past several years. Okay, so for the past several years, working on different semiconductors material systems, I come to believe that silicon is here to stay. As you know, current electronics relies hugely on silicon, and each of us in here must have a piece of silicon right now in your pocket, a silicon to join this Zoom. And this is being said, I admit, of course, a tremendous challenges for further scaling. Also in surface and interface challenges, especially when devices become smaller and complicated. So why silicon is here to stay is because I have a slide that says so. That says that we are now at silicon age over here. We are in silicon age. And this is going to last for another 2,000 years or so. And this picture was from presentation of Professor Leonard Feldman. So a more compelling argument why silicon is that silicon is a material that is not very exciting, really. It has average properties, but it check all the boxes required for the industry. Whereas we can find other materials that outperform silicon, but only for very specific areas. So the driving force between a huge investment of research and development we saw in the last decade is related to silicon itself, which is based on a straightforward extraction process. So two abundant elements we can find on Earth crust, silicon and oxygen, are so easy to extract and purify. So we can easily get high purity and high crystalline silicon with a large number of nines, 99999. So this can give you control and give a very uniform devices, hence very high yields for microfabrication. And what it gives us in the end is that for each one cent of investment, give you return of a 10,000 US dollar product. So this is a very difficult business model to compete with. And this is the origin of the argument. If it can be done with silicon, do it, do something else. So never use a new materials to compete with silicon unless silicon cannot do. And on the other hand, major tech companies are putting a lot of efforts to put optics on silicon. And the field of silicon photonics is rapidly evolving from the enormous demand to siliconized photonics. So it's little bit verb in here I'm using, which is driven by power dissipation problems in the computing industry. And this power dissipation is mostly coming from data transmission. That is why if you try to search in Google where big tech companies put their data centers, it will be in Alaska, in Ireland, very, very cold places near a river. It is a picture for us to remember what is the motivation. This is an image of Microsoft putting their computing rack in an ocean. This is to illustrate how desperate computing industry is with a solution. But optics or silicon photonics can alleviate this kind of problem. We can link microelectronic components using light, and light doesn't burn any power. So if you look at the long haul in here, of course, everything is driven by optical fibers. Everything is optics between data centers to industries to homes. Everything is optically driven. Yeah. Now, if you look into racks in a data center, for instance, this is a huge amount of energy consumed. Now, we need to take this limit between optical fiber and copper, sorry, and we need to have rack-to-rack connectivity, a chip-to-chip connectivity. If you think about it in a modern processor, there is literally hundreds of kilometers of copper wires. And what I meant to say again is that the cost also motivate this effort. In addition, there is a motivation from environment and energy sustainability perspective of using copper wires. And from semiconductor material standpoint, um, there are a few challenges to realize this. So first, silicon is an indirect bandgap semiconductor. So it poorly emits light and interacts very poorly with light. Intel and major players led by Professor John Powers of UCSB came up with the idea to wafer bond, basically to integrate indium phosphide-based lasers, which emit in telecom wavelength, on silicon by bonding them via plasma processing. But as you could imagine, this approach is not scalable at all, as it requires precise positioning of the optical components on the silicon wafer. So you could imagine that you need to take out your wafer from your CVD chamber and then bond with a certain materials. You need to be really precise how you couple your lasers into optical fibers. And then maybe you need to insert it again into your CVD chamber. And this limits the choice of process and drop the cost really significantly. Okay, so besides laser, what set of devices we need for this silicon photonics application? One answer is silicon germanium system for resonant tunneling diode or RTD to realize oscillator. In RTD, we are interested in this negative differentials or NDR region here in the IV characteristic. So this characteristic can be realized using this kind of a band structure. So classically speaking, when an incident carrier go in here approaching these double barrier structures, have the energies same with the energy in level inside this quantum well, it will be able to tunnel with tunneling probability equal to one or unity. So this manifested as the peak in the IV characteristic. So that's why you could get this kind of negative differential resistance region. Okay, another device example for silicon photonics is obviously germanium photodetectors on silicon. In this device, we want to integrate germanium P, I, and N structure on silicon substrate. So to summarize, beside heteroepitaxy, ability to grow lattice smart semiconductors epitaxially is to be able to have control towards band gap engineering. Okay. However, germanium and silicon are 4% lattice mismatch, and this because germanium crystal has a larger lattice constant than that of silicon. So this is what happened when you try to grow a very thin layer of germanium on silicon. You will get strained germanium because the larger atomic um, spacing of germanium now try to follow that of silicon. Okay. However, when you're trying to increase your epi layer, the germanium thickness, such that it's now larger than some critical value, uh, misfit dislocations are generated to accommodate this kind of strains. And this case, we call that our germanium epi layer is now relaxed. So some strains try to accommodate accommodated by misfit dislocations. Okay, so now we know that a dislocation must end at a free interface or green boundary. Therefore, the previous misfit dislocations, colored yellow in here, must glide to the surface. Yeah, and this extension of misfit dislocation is called a threading dislocation, shown on the red colored pictures, and hence um, it's residing on the surface and hence detrimental to top devices. So this is the TEM image of germanium films grown on silicon with a very high density of threading dislocations. And these dislocations can act as scattering center for the operation of whatever devices you try to grow on top of this layer. Okay, so to overcome all these challenges, two possible routes, at least from my classification, have been pursued over the years. And I'm lucky enough to have been involved in those two approaches. The first is to use novel materials, so try to change the material system and then integrate it into silicon with a well understood technique. And the second is to use more well-known materials and then use novel integration technique on silicon. Okay, so let's start to talk about the first one. Okay, just another sort of a brief background on this material is that recently shortwave infrared sensor attract great interest not only for communication with in silicon photonics chips, but also for biomedical purposes, environmental monitoring, etc. Um, to realize this, germanium tin has been explored quite extensively. So it's a group 4 alloy, and um, it could uh, make applications between 1 till 5 micrometer wavelength, thanks to its low band gap and band gap tunability. Okay, so this perspective propose a combination of all group 4 materials, germanium and tin, and silicon, and to create the same concept we have for 3-5 semiconductor, similar to indium gallium aluminum arsenide system. So basically, be able to control the lattice parameters and the band gap independently by allowing the chemical composition. So as you may know that the bulk germanium is an indirect band gap with L value in here lower than the K value. And the beauty of incorporating tin to create a germanium tin alloy is that you can tune these chi and L values in such a way that for tin content larger than 10%, you will have a direct band gap materials. Yeah. So integrating such alloy with silicon is quite straightforward. Um, because of we've known germanium on silicon, what's so called as a grid buffers, and it's quite uh, um, common techniques, and also processings are very compatible with silicon in microfabrication. Okay, so the issue is that photodetector sensitivity is too low due to serious thermal noise in SWIR range. And that's because of the low band gap nature of germanium tin, so that it's prone to thermal noises. So, for example, with germanium tin, you would get uh, responsivity around not more than 0.1 ampere per watt. So to suppress this, uh, we need to integrate resonant tunneling diode with photodetector based on germanium tin to tackle this kind of problem. So resonant tunneling photodetectors or RTD PD can be understood as a modification of unipolar semiconductor detector, as seen in the picture, this diagram. And this figure on the right side here show the Venn diagram of these devices. So the RTD-PD correspond to the monolithic integration of RTD itself. So right here with photodetectors, and in the Venn diagram here, the leftmost is the substrate, and the rightmost here is the epi layer. So in the dark condition, it acts as a normal RTD. So as I said, semi-classically because of the, the quantum well, so that when there is an electron approaching with an energy equal to the energy level, one of the energy level inside the quantum well, it will tunnel with tunneling probability equal to 1. So that's why you would get a peak in here. However, things become really interesting when you have a light shining on your device, because now you have photo-generated carriers, photo-generated electrons here and photo-generated hole in here, and then electric field would swap your carriers. And for electrons, it would swap um, quite easily in this device, but for holes, it will stuck in here because it will accumulate in these barrier structures due to the presence of these barrier structures. And this sort of give an enhancement in the electric field because it accumulate and then the built-in potential in this region increasing. And for us, effectively, this make the resonance be achieved at a lower voltage. So as a result, a redshift is expected to occur on the IV characteristic. So when the light on, the peak gets shifted to the left. Hence, there is a voltage range here. So for instance, in this range in here in which you could have largest photocurrent. Basically, the difference between light and dark currents is high in this region, for example. Okay. And recently, our group has reported the band alignment of germanium tin and germanium silicon tin alloys. And from the figures, you could see how we could design heterostructures by just varying chemical contents. In this case, we try to vary the chemical contents on these larger band gap layers, and you could see a different band offsets in here. Especially for a larger silicon content, you could see you could get quite large band offset, which is very favorable for RTD because you want to have sufficiently large band offset on your double barrier heterostructures. Okay, so just a background story. So almost a decade ago as well, a group of physicists from Taiwan predicted the occurrence of resonant tunneling in this kind of germanium tin heterostructures. So in their case, they use germanium tin special layer, and they varied the strain in the barrier. So by varying the silicon content. And theoretically, as you can see, when when they induce 1% strain, tensile strain, they obtain a quite large peak to valley ratio in here. However, no one had been successfully demonstrate resonant tunneling that time in experiment because of experimental challenges to realize germanium silicon tin with quite flat interface and what's called nice quality. Okay, so our research objective was to experimentally achieve resonant tunneling using germanium tin based quantum heterostructures. So for this purpose, we prepared quantum heterostructures by molecular beam epitaxy. And in our case, we sandwiched germanium tin well, colored red in here with two germanium silicon tin barrier layers here. We prepared two samples with different substrates, so P and the other one is was N. So first we did chemical cleaning and thermal cleaning, and then we did MBE, and this temperature was varied between 150 to 200 degrees C. And then in the end, we deposit aluminum using vacuum evaporation. So crystalline characterization uh, was done first by in situ reflection high energy electron diffraction or RED system. So this is for germanium substrates. So in here, so substrates, and then this is for the spatial layers, etc., etc. And you can see all the red patterns are quite streaky and spotty. And this indicates that the epitaxial growth with atomically flat interface was achieved. So it was a very good start. Next, the structural analysis was performed by X-ray diffraction with two-dimensional reciprocal space mapping, or as 2D RSM. And the mapping result indicates pseudomorphic growth of germanium tin spatial layers without the formation of strand-like layers. And by assuming Furgat's law, the tin content in the germanium tin spatial layer was estimated to be 3.82% for this sample. However, obviously, quantum well is too thin because it was just 20 nanometer times 3. So uh, observation through XRD was a bit difficult. Okay, so since it was difficult to judge whether or not the layer structure was grown only by XRD itself, as you could see earlier, so we performed STEM EDS analysis, and it can be observed that first the 20 nanometers space here was sufficiently formed. More importantly, the quantum wells here, which was 6 nanometer thick in total, was also sufficiently formed with flat interface. So, which is consistent with previous results I did show. Further, it was also verified that the thickness fluctuation is less than 1 nanometer. And you can see in here that the silicon was only presence in the barrier layers as we designed. So was good. Okay, so essentially this is the expected uh, energy band structure that we wanted. And notice that especially for the valence band offset here is so large so that we expect. Okay. Apakah apakah bisa melihat pointer saya? Can you guys see my pointer?
No, currently not.
How about now?
Yeah, yeah, we can see now.
Oh, I see. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay, Gary. Please continue.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Um. Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. So basically, essentially, we wanted to have a sufficiently large a valence band offset so that we hope to be able to get at least first resonance state to occur. Because if it's too small and then quantum confinement was not occur, because basically you need larger band offset to capture the first the ground state level. Okay, so this is the result we got for the quantum heterostructures on P substrate. So at temperature lower than 40 K, we experimentally observe RTD-like properties. You can see the hum in here as well. And the trend is that as the temperature increases, the current density increases, of course, but these RTD-like properties also disappear. And this, of course, indicates that existence of what's so called as strong thermal assisted scattering at high temperatures. So therefore, we measure another sample, the other samples also at the lowest possible temperature with our system. Okay, so this is the result for the other sample with N grown on N substrate. And in comparisons to those grown on P substrate, the heterostructures grown on N substrate doesn't show any RTD properties. Instead, it shows rectifying properties of a typical PN diode. So this clarify that hole are the majority carriers in our quantum heterostructures. Because the possible explanation for this is that uh, the quantum heterostructure is P, so that if you grew it on N, so that you could get a PN uh, heterojunction. And in fact, it agrees with our previous studies that also observe the unintentional hole generation using this kind of structure, which is related to the formation of vacancy defects. Okay, so moreover, the quantum well structure that we design theoretically suggests that we get ground state at 0.27. Okay, so this is the complete simulation for the spectra of the transmission tunneling characteristic. And you can see that the the TE spectra quite match with experiment, so that you can see Hamron 0.4, then Hamron here, and then it suggests that what we observe is using germanium tin based materials. Okay, so so that's so um, in this part, I will talk mostly based on germanium on silicon and indium phosphide on silicon as the model systems. Okay, so first I will talk about popular techniques for heteroepitaxy. I'll give a brief overview on this. So as I mentioned earlier, the first one is obviously you try to grade your materials, so grade buffers. So in the graded buffers, the idea is that lattice mismatch between layers were accommodated by the gliding of the pre-existing dislocations. So what I meant to say is if you try to grow a relaxed silicon germanium alloy, you try to grade the composition of germanium alloy before you reach your desired alloy composition. So you increase slowly so that the existing misfit glide it and then come, become misfit and glide again, and then and so on and so on and so on. And second technique is selective area growth. And it used the idea that in a small area, threading dislocation can be trapped by the sidewalls. However, these two techniques have limitations. The graded buffers needs more thick layers because especially for larger lattice mismatch, you need to have micron thick layers. And for the germanium grown on selective area, it kind of limits on how large your germanium can be laterally. And this limitation hinder the wide industrial uses of these heteroepitaxial techniques. Okay, so to get rid of those limitations associated with the conventional heteroepitaxy techniques, we have come up with a novel techniques called metal catalyzed lateral epitaxy. And our techniques relies on two important building blocks. First, we use what's called as vapor liquid solid or VLS uh, process to control the nucleation site of germanium crystal for the case of germanium on silicon. And the growth process under what's called microcrucible structure. So we make use of mechanical capping layer inside microcrucible structure to mechanically confine the growth and sort of uh, creating a template for lateral epitaxy. And the process is as follows. So first, you prepare your microcrucible, and then you bring it to your epitaxy chamber, CVD, for example, so that when you introduce your precursor gases, the germanium, for example, will crack preferentially on the gold catalyst inside the capping layers, and then the gold will agglomerate. And as you keep dosing your reactor, your germanium crystal gets thicker and thicker, and due to the presence of the capping layers, the germanium is forced to grow horizontally, laterally. And by the way, this technique is quite well known in nanowires community, basically using gold as preferential nucleation site. And then the gold is always in the liquid state during the growth and guide the nanowires one directional uh, uh, growth. Yeah, I'll just say a few important things about VLS mechanism that is exploited here. So since the first discovery by Wagner and Alice in silicon nanowires, this mechanism has been used extensively, actually, for different compound semiconductor nanowires as well. So the idea is that this gold will guide the one-dimensional uh, vertical growth, but now people also able to achieve horizontal growth on different substrates. And this kind of phenomenon can be understood by looking at this phase diagram. If you are coming from more materials engineering background, you would be more familiar with this one. And this line here is called liquidus line, which indicate the equilibrium composition of the liquid alloy at the given temperature. So y-axis is the temperature, and then let's say you are in the point A in here. So some thermodynamics fluctuation could dissolve more silicon into a saturated state, indicated by solid arrow in here. And to compensate the shifting, the solid precipitate happening of poor silicon, dot dash arrow in here, and the liquid alloy is shifting back to the equilibrium state. And this process keep going and going, and then you can have um, more like guided growth of semiconductors. Okay, so regarding the micro crucible that we used in our process, sort of the template for the lateral process, the micro fabrication is quite straightforward. So first we do photolithography to pre-pattern the silicon substrate with photoresist or PR in short, and then we deposit metal films by electron beam evaporation technique on the pre-patterned silicon substrate, and then afterward we do metal lift-off process to get the initial mass pattern. And the next step is to deposit the capping layer with which consists of silicon dioxide and silicon nitride. This step used PECVD, plasma enhanced chemical vapor deposition. That's why we also call it PECVD layers. And then we do selective etching using SF6 deep reactive ion etching to selectively expose the gold and create opening. And finally, the substrate will be immersed into a gold etchant to form sort of a crucible structure. So chemical etching and then forming a crucible structure, like a cave sort of thing. Okay, so this is how the sample looks like after epitaxial growth in silicon um, at 375 degrees C with germanium hydride flow rate of 5 SECM for 1 hour. And from the top view SEM in here, we can see that the microscale germanium thin film were successfully formed on silicon substrate. And this germanium film were inside the vicinity of gold silicon germanium eutectic solid. Yeah, because you started with the gold and then you expose your gold with germanium, it becomes germanium gold alloy, and because you have silicon substrate, the silicon diffuse into your films. So you're starting with gold silicon germanium, and as you expose more and more germanium, germanium precipitate, but it's still inside the vicinity of germanium silicon gold alloy. Hope that makes sense. So using VLS and microcrucible structure, we can suppress the generation of threading dislocations. So the idea is you had threading dislocations, yeah, at your first initial germanium nucleated film. And then as you grow laterally, so in this direction towards you. These film directions gonna extend the threading location in the interface, so it stay as a misfit, as shown in the dash yellow. So under TM, it will show more clearly. So you start here, for example, and then you grow to the left side, and then it stay at the interface. So you would have this region in which it's quite high quality uh, with minimum threading locations level in which you can grow your devices, for example, photo detectors. Okay. However, despite promising preliminary results, there are still several challenges. So it's very early in its development. We are still lack of understanding of the growth kinetics and mechanisms and about the nanostructures itself. What sort of germanium silicon uh, gold eutectic that you would get and how that correlates with the kinetics of the growth. So I will briefly discuss on the growth modeling first. Okay, so for this reason, we studied the relationship between, so this is the SEM of the germanium film uh, with the gold catalyst sizes. So we try to plot it. So you can see inside its crucible. So it's the crucible itself, but seen from the top view, you can see that there is a brighter area in here which correspond to the gold alloy, the gold catalyst, and then the darker area in here is the germanium film. So if we try to plot the germanium size versus the gold size, it would look something like this. You can see that as we increase the gold area, we increasing the size of the gold, you would get larger germanium, and then it reaches sort of a peak, and then it go down after a certain level. This kind of behavior, if you are in the VLS nanowires growth community, is actually very, very strange because the traditional understanding of the VLS growth doesn't predict this behavior at all. So to reconcile this, we try to develop a growth model, assuming that the germanium film is in the rectangular shape, and then the gold catalyst is in the half cylindrical shape like that. And there are three contributions to the growth. The first is from the net vapor flux, level 1, and the second is from the datum substrate diffusion, level 2, and the third contribution is from the capping layer diffusions, level 3 in here. This model shown in the black curve in the germanium size versus gold size. So that the oh, wait a minute. Oh yes, the traditional model shown in the black curve in here um, doesn't give us any peaks, yeah, any kind of like plateau peak characteristics. It means that there is some mental wrong missing in the way we see VLS model. It doesn't take into account what we call as a supersaturation effect, which need to vary when you keep increasing your catalyst sizes. So when we try to incorporate this supersaturation effect shown in the red curve in here, we can reproduce a peak in the kinetics curve. However, of course, I agree with you. We found that our data has a lot of variance and a normalization is required. So, and this variation is basically due to the mechanical deformation of the capping layer. So if you remember, because we mechanically inhibit the vertical growth, we have some films go this way, but maybe some film go this way, some film go too big and then agglomerate quite big. So there is variation on the vertical axis. So we need to do normalization, and then um, when we try to normalize the data um, by defining with the gold area ratio in the y-axis, so giving you germanium gold area ratio in here, you could see that our model shown in the right curve here fit better than traditional VLS. So essentially, in addition to traditional contributions from vapor flux 1 and then the diffusions 2 and 3, here we introduce what's so called as the multiscale supersaturation. And here we have the idea that the C0 is the supersaturation concentration is the minimum number of the germanium precursors that need to make your gold to start supersaturation. Because if it's lower than that, it will not be able to start um, with the VLS process. So we've been able to achieve to reconcile the nanoscale and microscale VLS process using this supersaturation term. Okay, so now let's discuss the results we have for indium phosphide on silicon. And this is a bit different because it was grown in what's so called a surface diffusion limited regime by chemical beam epitaxy or CBE, which is different with the previous ones, which was grown in a CVD chamber. In CBE, the pressures was orders of magnitude smaller than in a CVD reactor. Hence, the precursor gases for the case of indium phosphide, TMI, trimetal indium, and precrack phosphine, P2 here, move to the heated sample as a beam, hence the name chemical beam epitaxy. The challenge is therefore to make the precursor adatom to be able to diffuse into the silicon, which is located hidden underneath the capping layer. Hence, this growth is called to be in the surface diffusion limited regime. And to grow indium phosphide, we use two steps growth strategy. So after a series of preparation steps, we expose the microcrucible with only indium precursors for 1 hour at 350 degrees C, and then we simultaneously expose the sample with indium and indium and phosphine for another 1 hour. This is how the microcrucible looks like under a plan view SEM before the growth. So it's top view. With the double arrows in here indicates the location of the opening. So the precursor would go from here to here, from this opening only, and everything else is covered. And this is the SEM image after the 1 hour indium only exposure. We can see that a lot of indium particles are found across the samples as bright dots in here. In addition, you could also observe that the gold agglomerates into sort of islands in here. There are mine islands, but still there are gold silicon eutectic, gold silicon, possibly indium eutectic. And interestingly as well, some main gold island located near very to the opening, but some are very far away from the opening. And finally, after simultaneous indium and phosphine exposures, we can see that the unintentional indium phosphide nanowires here are formed everywhere on the capping layers. But fortunately, we can still find some regions on the microcrucible where we can still see the main gold islands under SEM. You can see this clean sort of area. When we try to draw a distribution of the main gold islands, so main islands are the big islands, the bigger islands inside the crucible, it looks like this. This distance to the opening indicated as delta X is the distance between the opening, the double arrow in here, and the largest gold island. So I took the largest one. And interestingly, uh, when we used double opening microcrucible, so this schematically shown in here, where you have two openings instead of one, you see that the distance uh, to the openings of this main gold island become twice shorter, twice shorter. So this make the double opening microcrucible uh, potentially be used in the CBE lateral epitaxy process because it will make it easier for the indium and phosphine adatoms to be able to diffuse into the gold because the distance is now twice shorter. Okay, so in fact, from SEM, we can find such good islands in the double opening microcrucible, shown by the double arrows in here for the openings, and they are residing very close to the opening. So here, 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 very, very close to the opening. So first, we try to compare the images with high voltage and low voltage at 30 and 5 kV. 5 kV obviously has a much lower penetration depth. So this used to confirm that this uh, islands are located inside the capping layers because it was not seen anymore when we reducing the voltage, the starting voltage. Okay, so moreover, by the EDS line scan through line C, for example, in here, we can know that these two God islands here, so I crop realign in here, we can know that these two has well-aligned EDS spec peak with the gold, so it's obviously God islands. But interestingly, both God islands have strong indium and phosphine signals. So this indicates indium phosphorus gold alloy. But then since gold has low solubility in phosphorus, if you try to check the phase diagram of gold and phosphorus, you would see that the solubility of phosphorus in gold is very low. And then we can associate that this indium and phosphine signal is from nucleated indium phosphide film. Okay, so that results are quite promising. Okay, but I need to talk about the second challenges which still exist about nanostructures of the formed eutectic solids. So if you remember, the germanium films were grown in the vicinity of the gold silicon germanium eutectic for the case of germanium on silicon. And then these nanostructures features are still uh, understudied. Okay, for this reason, we prepared a sample uh, by CVD at 375 degrees C with germanium hydride fluoride lower than the before, just for SCCM, for an hour. Uh, Basically, we want to get a clear eutectic form before supersaturation, because after supersaturation, you would get larger germanium film, and then you would have difficulty in studying the uh, gold germanium silicon eutectic. So you would need to do it before supersaturation in this case. And this is the schematic of the sample after CVD, in which these are the gold silicon germanium alloys schematically under the capping layer. And then after DRIE under SF6 for 18 minutes, the sample schematically looks like this. And further chemical etching of the gold, you remove all the gold species, and we hope to refill some leftover uh, silicon germanium nanostructures on silicon substrate. Okay. Interestingly, on the same wafer, we found a strong effect. So this is optical microscope um, of the foam nanostructures. So these horizontal trapezoids are neck-boring samples, the previous one we saw. So you saw this one, right? The vertical triangle with opening here. So now we have horizontal shape, but the opening is here. So effectively, the opening is much larger on the right side sample. And you can see, even on the optical microscope, you can see difference between these two features. And this is interesting because these two uh, arrays of nanostructures are located close to another, maybe 120 micrometer, which is quite close, and on the very same substrate. Of course, optical microscope is not enough, so we need to do further uh, micro nanoscale characterization. And under an SEM, the first structure on the left side of the previous slide. So on the left side here is shown over here now. And you can see from SEM that these nanostructures look more dendritic, maybe like trees. So we call it nanotrees, with brighter regions in the middle. Here have some leftover gold. However, germanium signal is quite small and very random noises. So possibly there is germanium, but very low. And further EDS investigations reveal that these nanostructures actually have quite rich with the gold. Meanwhile, the horizontal trapezoid, the one with the longer opening, so on the right side of the optical microscope image on the few slides before, give us array of more globular nanorings. Not sure if you can see it on your screen, but it's nothing like before. It's more like a tree here, and then you can see arrays of sort of globular nanostructures. Moreover, the EDS signal strongly suggests that the germanium is much higher than before. So it suggests that there is a play around of the germanium content on that responsible of the formation of these nanostructures. Okay, so our investigation so far suggests that different openings, so larger opening and smaller opening, give us different nanostructures, and this relates to how much germanium precursor gases crack on the gold catalyst. So if you have large, uh, more germanium doses, you would have more globular eutectic, and then if you have less germanium, you will have more dendritic. And you can, if you're from metallurgic background, you would understand this as common lamella rods features in metallic eutectic. Okay, so I think I have a couple of minutes left, if I understand correctly. So I will give you an overview on works we have been doing in my current appointment with Quantum Solutions. So since it's quite relevant, so basically I'm now working on colloidal quantum dots. So it's in a way it's another way to integrate more uh, different types of semiconductors on silicon substrate. And our quantum dot is in colloid state, so you can easily spin casted your quantum dot materials on top of silicon substrates or any substrates really. So to give an overview, quantum dot is semiconductor nanocrystal, and then the size, shape, and composition determine their optical properties. So in the germanium tin, you change your materials properties by changing the alloy. In here, you have more degree of freedom because you can change by changing the size of your nanoparticles, of your quantum dots. And then we have a ligand uh, in the interface that also tune how the quantum dot interacts with each other. So for example, uh, in the example I have here is that you have cadmium selenide single crystal, but then if you make it as a quantum dot, you can change the band gap even more. So giving you more wide range of band gap. You can imagine. So sphere range of materials is expanded. So silicon is around here from the visible until near infrared. And then for sphere application around here, 1,200 till 2,500, silicon is definitely not working anymore. So you need to work on different materials. And I did show you how germanium and indium phosphide as well as germanium tin, but with uh, colloidal quantum dots, you can extend this because by changing the sizes, you can also have a different band gap. So this is a very interesting venue and open up different more applications, especially our company is working on image sensors. So is to see through obstructions for night vision, good sorting, multispectral imaging, and entity tests. I will show you some study cases examples. Um, so the problem with current image sensors grown on silicon is that it is very high cost, uh, and then low scalability, and still it's still low resolution. So the issue was that so to make image sensors, um, you need to have silicon readout circuits, yeah, based on silicon, and then usually companies, bigger players like Sony, when they doing their epitaxial image sensors, they need to solder bump-ons every pixel, and then this is very high cost because it's low in the yield, and the success basically the success rate is very small. With the solution process quantum dots, you can start with silicon ROIC wafers, and then in parallel you manufacture your quantum dot, and then you can easily spin cast your quantum dot on the silicon, and then by lithography and a few nanofabrication steps, you would be ready for wafer dicing, and then you have heterostructures devices on top of silicon, for example. So In fact, our sensor is quite working very very nice, quite good around this region, and then with very high quantum efficiency measured at 1550 with very low dark current, and then because it's solution process, so you would skip uh, a lot of steps, and then it drag the cost becoming reduced very very low. So the case study is to try to sort different materials. For example, in here, you would see different types of polymers, different type of polymers with the iPhone camera. You could see like some looks white and very different to differentiate. So this three, for example, sorry, this four and this three different. But then when you have your sphere camera with playing around with uh, your filters, you could differentiate here with here, for example, and then even with here, and then here is very strong, different. So you could use it for differentiating different materials, and then try to mix it. You will get more confused. But then with the our sphere camera, you could still see different between those. Okay, I will share video that show promise of this kind of is colloidal quantum dots on silicon. And then share. Yes. Can you now see my video? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm playing. So on the left side is the iPhone camera, and then you try uh to expose smoke, and then it's very difficult to see with iPhone what is behind that smoke. But then uh with the sphere image sensor, you can see it through the smoke. So it's very promising for low visibility environment. Okay. Yeah. Uh, yeah. So the idea is really because of most materials have sort of a fingerprints in the uh, sphere area. That's why you can see that different material absorb differently and behave differently with sphere photons. Okay, so to conclude, we have introduced potential of germanium silicon tin alloy as new semiconductor for sphere. We have introduced novel integration technique, employing metal catalysts and microcrucible structures to integrate more mature materials on silicon. And then we have briefly also overview potential of colloidal QD for sphere image sensors on silicon. Okay, so I think I reached the time. So thank you very much. I would be happy to answer any questions if you have one.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Pak Gali atas pemaparan materi. Oke, eh, mungkin dari teman-teman apakah ada yang ingin menyampaikan pertanyaan untuk terkait materi yang disampaikan oleh Pak Gali? Silakan raise hand. Oke, silakan Pak Rahman, boleh menyampaikan pertanyaannya.
Ya, terima kasih banyak kali atas materi yang disampaikan pagi ini. Eh, ada beberapa yang ingin saya tanyakan, mungkin biar men-trigger teman-teman lainnya untuk menggali lebih dalam perihal diskusi kita pagi ini ya. Mungkin untuk yang paling eh, mendasar tadi saya agak sempat kurang nangkap untuk informasi perihal potensi cara dari bagaimana kita mendeteksi adanya komposisi kimia yang kita miliki itu sesuai dengan theoretical recipe yang dibuat khususnya di formasi epi layer di sistem germanium silicon tin tadi. Nah, ini bisa tolong diulas lebih dalam eh, metode atau let's say teknik apa saja yang kita coba terapkan nih untuk mengetahui agar nilai-nilai yang kita set di desain pertama itu klop dengan apa yang diinginkan. Mungkin itu aja dulu kali,
Ya,
silakan.
oke, saya coba share screen. Oke, ya, terima kasih Pak Remel atas pertanyaannya. Ya tentu untuk komposisi eh, skala nano cukup susah karena seperti yang saya sampaikan tadi mungkin. Oke, saya end show dulu ya karena di slide awal. Jadi saya memakai PowerPoint versi yang baru, jadi tidak, saya masih bingung fitur untuk menuju ke slide tertentu.
Ya nggak apa-apa, santai saja. Kita masih cukup banyak waktu kok. Akhirnya ketemunya malah di sini, di depan layar kali. Awalnya mau kita
Iya,
ketemuan di Singapura nggak jadi.
ya sudah kelihatan ya, Pak.
Ya,
Em,
ya, ya
ya,
kelihatan.
jadi tentu karena skala nano cukup susah untuk menangkap signal, misalkan menggunakan X-ray biasa. Jadi seperti yang terlihat hanya germanium tin di spacer yang 40 nanometer in total. Sama
Mm-mm.
tentu saja dari substrate. Eh, untuk komposisinya, untuk kasus proyek ini kita rely on recipe, Pak. Jadi eh, kita buat bulknya, terus after several runs, we got confident on the recipe. So for high tin content di sini kita um, um, menggunakan resepi yang di bulk, kemudian kita apply kan. Tapi dari stem uh, EDS cukup noisy ya karena sangat
Mm-mm.
tipis.
Ya.
Jadi tapi kita bisa melihat at least qualitatively kalau silikon cukup populated di barriers layers karena
Mm.
kita ingin silikon tidak di quantum well cukup banyak karena nanti nge-drag band offsetnya. Jadi qualitatively speaking kita pakai stem. Ya, jadi untuk kasus special layers ini kita udah coba pakai Raman juga, but obviously it's very difficult. So the idea was we etch from the top, uh,
Oh,
we etch with some chemicals, and then we try to do
ya,
Raman to
ya,
get
ya.
surface. Then still, so
Mm.
and we come back to relying on the bulk recipe
Mm. Oke, oke.
in this case. Yeah,
Ya, ya, itu menurut saya sih memang very tricky ya, karena seperti terlihat komposisi ketebalannya kan terbilang eh, tipis lah ya. Jadi saya juga mikir
tipis sekali.
ini bakal challenging banget untuk mengetahui banget bahwa resepi kita as on target terlihat bahwa spacer layernya terbentuk bagus. Tapi setidaknya dari stem cross sectional tadi kan udah kelihatan banget kok bahwa si silikonnya kan nicely involved as expected gitu. Jadi menurut saya sih ini one of the piece work dan menurut saya salah satu novelty-nya yang mana
Yeah,
penggunaan kombinasi dua teknik tersebut dari pendekatan ini XRD 2D RSM dengan cross sectional STM menurut saya sudah cukup banget. Bahkan kebayang ini SN-nya gila kecil banget tuh ngelihatnya caranya gimana. Jadi nggak kebayang apalagi kalau
iya.
ketika berhasil. Jadi dari kalau dari Raman itu sendiri hampir nyaris nggak bisa terbedakan ya eh, sebelum ataupun
Mungkin kalau
sesudah.
ya, ya Pak, mungkin kalau misalkan kita fokus ya untuk mencari edge rate yang benar untuk kasus
Hmm.
germanium tin,
Hmm.
mungkin akan bisa mungkin ya karena uh, assuming we have a good working agent.
Hmm.
Tapi kadang mungkin over edge, kadang mungkin under edge. Jadi malah menambah ketidakpastian. Jadi kita tidak pakai. Terus kalau di
Hmm.
uh, uh, RTD community, di mungkin di general quantum electronic devices, sepertinya orang-orang juga kesusahan. Jadi rely ke working recipe, kemudian going to
Hmm.
device, and then if you have problems, you come back to TM. But
Iya.
of course, it's quite costly
Mm-mm.
to do that.
Pasti. Itu satu pengukuran untuk cross-sectional STM habis berapa banyak tuh duit.
Untungnya saya tidak yang memikirkan waktu itu. Ini proyek undergraduate saya.
Oke, oke.
Very privileged as an undergraduate.
Iya.
Think about
Iya.
this.
Oke, oke. Iya, mungkin kalau boleh saya second question. Jadi sekarang posisi di Quantum Solution sebagai R&D untuk pengembangan di apa ya, image sensor ya. Jadi itu si quantum core yang dipakainya eh, tadi saya agak-agak lost dikit. Yang dipakai aktif materi berbasis apa ya?
Oke, jadi sebenarnya di Quantum Solution saya cenderung ke device sekarang. Jadi awalnya saya start from physics and then went as materials science student, and then now I'm going full as a device physicist actually. So
Hmm.
the active materials for our sensors is lead sulfide actually. I don't have the slide in
Oh,
here.
ya nggak apa-apa, nggak apa-apa.
Uh, yeah,
Sulfida,
but
ya ya. Heeh.
yeah, yeah, lead sulfida.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oke,
apa?
jadi
Um,
em,
yeah.
maaf potong dikit kali. Jadi itu di kasus lead sulfida ini kan di sana kan eh, setahu saya kalau udah pakai solution base itu
Mhm,
mengatur proporsi eh, besar dan ukuran. Nah ini
betul.
resepinya kan kurang lebih udah ada baku lah ya dengan di komunitas. Nah dari quantum solution ini bisa menawarkan sampai ke titik terkecil di ukuran berapa di PBS quantum flow ini ya.
Hmm, pertanyaan sangat bagus ya. Saya harus merujuk ke company's sales profile-nya. Saya tidak update sampai berapa,
Hmm.
tapi saya bisa gambarkan. Di sini ada
Nah,
slide-nya. Bentar.
itu menurut saya keren banget bisa nembus sampai SWIR regime ya, karena itu
Ya,
mau nggak mau juga nggak bisa lari dari quantum confinement effect yang dimiliki di KBS. Dan itu menurut saya itu salah satu niche application lah.
ya, saya ada slide-nya. Ya, jadi saya kurang tahu apakah Pak Ramel sempat dengar perusahaan kami? Oh,
Iya, kita
belum
sebenarnya
ya.
kebetulan ada undangan satu sih untuk collab dan kebetulan juga
Oh ya,
kalau nama perusahaan juga sama.
oh ya,
Saya pas lihat, wah Gali ternyata kerja di situ juga.
oh ya. Em, berarti kenal dengan Mas Lutfan ya?
Ya, ya sekilas lah. Saya nggak berinteraksi
Saya,
langsung, tapi saya
ya
tahu lah.
sini. Oh ya, saya share screen. Ah, ya, ya, kita bisa sampai peak yang hijau ini berarti
Hmm.
2,
Hmm.
oke, size
11 sampai
11,5
dua
nanometer
koma dua
untuk
ya.
yang
Oke,
besar.
oke.
Ya,
Oke. Eh, ini berarti untuk mengatur tunability size-nya itu main di processing komposisi rasio
yes.
kah atau kita main mungkin nggak terlalu material banget ya. Nah,
Mhm.
saya yakin mungkin Gali juga butuh baca-baca lagi. Cuma berarti di sana memang sudah istilahnya eh, bisa mendefine lah ya PBS quantum dot size-nya. Kita kalau let's say saya pengen dapat 10 nanometer nih, kita udah pakai oke kita pakai prekursor A dan B-nya segini gitu ya kan.
Ya, ya,
Sehingga saya untuk PBSQ di sini memang bakal dikelilingin oleh beberapa ligan yang seperti terlihat di layar kita bersama ya. Di situ, nah ini yang karena kalau dari anak kimia senangnya kan ngelihat proses interaksi yang terjadi nih antara Q discord dan ligannya. Ini kalau di sana berarti kalau saya lihat dari slide ini aja variabilitas ligannya udah cukup banyak ya. Jadi kalau lihat yang di pojok tengah bawah tuh, saya lihat udah main Thailand regimenya sampai ada
ya.
8 3 8 at least lah ya. Nah ini jadi em, si ligan ligan ini memang istilahnya kalau boleh gali dikit ya. Ini kita udah main ke ligan dengan high purity berarti ya. Kita
Ya,
nggak
ya. Terus kita
hmm,
juga bisa customize, Pak. Jadi
hmm,
um, memang tim sintesis bisa membuat ink juga, artinya
hmm,
solution
hmm,
ligand
hmm.
exchange.
Hmm,
Ya.
hmm, hmm. Oke,
Ya.
oke. Sip,
Tapi
sip.
untuk fabrikasi
Hmm.
biasanya cenderung lebih efektif solid phase ligand exchange untuk fabrikasi. Jadi
Oke,
emergent service-nya diganti waktu udah di spin coat.
oke, oke. Keren, keren. Mungkin saya lempar dulu ke pertanyaan yang lain, takutnya terlalu
Siap.
mendominasi. Ya, silakan Pak Moderator, Bapak Afif.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Ramel atas pertanyaannya. Oke, mungkin kita akan beralih ke pertanyaan selanjutnya dari Mbak Rati ya ini ya. Jadi pertanyaannya itu pada proses PLS pertumbuhan AU island itu kan sangat rigid dan presisi di capping area dan mencapai supersaturated tadi. Apakah proses kontrolnya murni bergantung pada instrumen pembuatan atau ada trik khusus saat lab work, terutama kontrol yang menyangkut tentang nukleasi dan growth stage tadi? Terima kasih.
Ya. Em, Sangat tergantung pada epitaksi teknik yang kita pakai. Jadi seperti yang saya sampaikan tadi, ketika menggunakan CVD untuk mencapai gold catalyst sangat mudah ya, sangat mudah karena em, masih dalam vapor phase. Jadi vapor phase kemudian masuk ke dalam gold catalyst, kemudian nucleated. Tapi ketika kita ganti ke CBE yang mana ultra high vacuum, em, karena apa? eh, Diffusion length-nya atom semakin bertambah, jadinya seperti beam. Dan ketika ini seperti beam, waktu masuk ke capping layer jadi harus susah. Ketika kita tumbuhkan indium phosphide, sayangnya di depan capping layers kadang ada tumbuh unintentional indium phosphide nanowires. Jadi ketika masuk terhambat, eh, tidak jadi reaching the gold catalyst. Jadi sangat tergantung pada epitaxy techniques nomor satu. Terus yang untuk rigidity of capping layers and the basically to inhibit the vertical growth, butuh optimisasi di bagian capping layers. Tapi formulasi kita silikon dioksida dan silikon uh, nitride cukup rigid karena mechanically strong tapi tidak brittle. Karena misalkan kita cuma pakai silikon dioksida, um, kelihatan kuat, tapi ketika uh, kita naikkan temperaturnya, kan gold uh, will be agglomerated and it uh, pushing the capping layers. Terus ketika tidak ada nitrite, stress reliefnya sangat susah. Nah,
Hmm.
jadi kita uh, cukup sedikit mengoptimalkan capping layersnya. Tapi untuk growth mechanism sendiri sangat tergantung pada epitaxy methods yang kita pilih. Semoga menjawab.
Oke, baik. Untuk Mbak Rati, apakah cukup jawabannya?
Sudah cukup, Pak Moderator. Terima kasih, Pak
Oke,
Gali.
ya.
Ya, sama-sama. Terima kasih banyak.
Jadi, apa ada pertanyaan lagi terkait pemaparan materi hari ini? Oke, kalau belum ada mungkin mungkin dari saya ya itu pertanyaannya ya. Eh ini Pak, tadi saya juga ingin bertanya soal yang metode PLS juga itu. Jadi boleh ke slide yang
Oh ya,
pemaparan tentang mekanisme PLS-nya Pak itu untuk growth GE film
ya, siap. Eh, Bagian mana? Boleh diulangi?
yang bagian GE itu growth GE film dan menggunakan metode PLS-nya
Oh, skematiknya ya. Oke,
ya
siap.
skematiknya.
Eh, Mungkin ini ya. Oke, saya share screen lagi. Ya,
Ya, ini menggunakan PLS ya ini. Ini pertanyaan saya ya, ini sebagai orang yang awam ini. Eh, ini saya perhatiin untuk growing mechanismnya ini, hasil growingnya ini GE filmnya ini kayak terlihat apakah ini menggunakan metode VLS ini akan menghasilkan GE film yang merata gitu? Dan juga apakah uniformity atau kerataan dari GE filmnya ini berpengaruh ya untuk aplikasi shortwave infrared itu, eh, aplikasi shortwave infrarednya, Pak?
Ya, em, pertanyaannya bagus sekali di apa masalah kerataan ini ya, karena kan capping layernya mendesak ke atas, kemudian seperti yang kita lihat tadi di data kineticsnya sangat high variance, tapi ketika kita normalize sama catalyst size lebih normalized ya. Jadi memang itu main challenge sekarang. Jadi kita tahu bahwa ketika germanium film masih dalam tahap awal, misalkan di sini tahap nggak bisa melihat ya di bagian sini ini um, thickness-nya sangat variatif. Jadi di studi awal ini kita belum mengoptimalkan uh, thickness dari epilayer. Tapi yang kita tahu bahwa ketika kita tingkatkan uh, growth time-nya, waktu tumbuhnya, germanium filmnya cenderung stabil. Jadi di bagian paling ujung cenderung uh, lebih homogen uh, thickness-nya. Nah, terus ini penting untuk further optimization karena menyangkut ke surface roughness. Terus seperti misalkan contoh germanium itu nanti kita bakal tumbuhkan another layer of germanium PINN to create PIN. Jadi interface sangat berpengaruh. Apalagi misalkan aplikasi laser ya, yang mana very small defects can kill uh, your electrons and holes, sangat berpengaruh. Um, jadi ini masih sangat early stage, teman-teman. Banyak sekali venue, apalagi di VLS nanowires, orang-orang masih fokus ke nanoscale karena one dimensional direction. Jadi untuk ranah material science masih a lot of opportunity di larger scale VLS. Misalkan rekan-rekan uh, 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 aktif di area gold catalyst, coba getting larger film and you will get interesting material science, new material science.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Ragali atas pemaparannya. Cukup jelas. Terima kasih banyak. Mungkin kita ada yang
Terima kasih.
raise hand ini dari Pak Joko. Silakan Pak Joko pertanyaannya.
Ya, makasih Vip. Terima kasih Pak Gali atas presentasinya. Maaf sini saya nggak pakai video ya. Eh, saya Joko dari Pusat Riset Psikologi Kuantum. Saya juga dulu waktu S2 juga main ini ya. Aluminium induced kristalin. Jadi dan main nanowire juga. Eh
Hmm.
kata kalau di sana itu kan ada beberapa pilihan ya Pak. Kalau untuk kristalisasi silikon misalnya pakai AU, pakai AL gitu ya. Katanya kalau AU itu dia malah ini ya seperti doping jadinya ketika di etching.
Yes.
Heeh. AU-nya nggak bisa keluar secara keseluruhan gitu. Kenapa dipilih AU Pak pada ini? Kenapa nggak AL atau apa gitu yang
Ya,
metal
ya,
yang lain ya?
ya.
Ya.
Terima kasih Pak Joko. Another very good question. Jadi seperti yang Pak Joko bilang untuk for the benefits of other audiences ya. Jadi uh, gold sebenarnya itu sangat racun ya untuk silikon. Seperti Pak Joko tahu mungkin ya. Jadi kalau misalkan teman-teman main ke Intel gitu, seluruh perhiasan gold harus dilepas. Nah, alasannya karena gold itu um, deep uh, donor levels, jadi bakal ngerusak silikon. Nah, tentu di VLS banyak pilihannya, misalkan tadi aluminium, kemudian silver, indium juga act as a catalyst. Tapi biasanya karena mereka tidak inert, mereka bakal teroksidasi dengan cepat. Nah, ini mempengaruhi catalytic effect dari metal catalyst. Nah, di uh, early early stage of this project, kita tidak mau uh, meresikokan oksidasi. Jadi ketika fabrikasi ini pun dari proses eh, eh, deposisi gold hingga PECVD kita lakukan harus cepat karena kalau enggak oksidasinya sangat tinggi. Nah, kalau misalkan biasanya saya kurang tahu Pak Joko dulu waktu di S2 apakah itu in situ aluminium. Biasanya kalau nanowires mereka in situ. Jadi misalkan nanowire gallium nitride gitu in situ gallium, maka tidak terus
Ah,
diambil
oke
keluar.
oke. Nggak,
Apakah
kalau
apakah
di
in situ?
kalau di aluminium induced crystallization itu malah kita butuh oxide layernya untuk ini dia mengontrol difusinya, Mas.
Oh, interesting. Nah,
Jadi
menarik banget.
aluminium oxide-nya, jadi di AU untuk mencegah ini ya. Oh, jadi germanium
Inertness-nya.
yang ditemuin di CVD ini udah dalam fase kristalin juga ya, Mas. Ketika
Ya, sudah
uh,
sudah fase
oh,
kristalin,
oh,
epitaxial,
tekstil ya.
epitaxial.
Kayaknya
Ya, saya kurang tahu. Tapi memang saya dengar ada metal katalis yang catalytic effect-nya meningkat dengan oksidasi. Saya memang tahu. Ya, tapi em, Anda benar. Jadi pemilihan gold ini untuk device kurang preferable. Jadi obviously we need to change that to other. Tapi untuk early stage untuk mencegah komplikasi dari oksidasi, kita pilih yang inert. Begitu kira-kira.
baik, sip. Ini saya juga pernah buat silicon nanowire, terus mau dalam fase amorphous, terus pakai aluminium gitu, Mas. Ini saya
Hmm.
baru kepikiran ini ada teknik capping layer ya harusnya ya. Eh, jadi
Iya.
ketika kita buat amorphous silicon nanowire dan kita mau promote kristalisasinya pakai aluminium gitu, ya dia difusinya random ya, difusinya random.
Hmm.
Dan mungkin capping layer di sini eh, ini ya idenya untuk mengontrol itunya ya growth ya.
Thickness-nya. Ya.
Siap, siap. Iya,
Em,
thanks.
Saran saya mungkin uh, saya kurang tahu apakah itu nano skill atau micro skill, tapi misalkan Pak Joko tertarik bisa main-main dikit eksperimen Friday eksperimen gitu, tingkatkan size-nya, mungkin akan find something interesting. Tapi itu cukup menarik tadi yang dibilang Pak Joko. Saya juga kurang apa eh, kurang mencoba katalis lain. Misalkan nanti tertarik kita bisa diskusi lebih lanjut.
Kak, ya, siap. Ya, terima kasih, Pak.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih Pak Joko atas pertanyaannya. Oke, terima kasih kepada semua penanya atas pertanyaannya. Tapi sadly we come to the end of our time. Mungkin ini kita ke sesi selanjutnya. Untuk Pak Gali, apakah ada closing statement terkait materi hari ini?
Ya, closing statement saya tentu sangat banyak venue ya. Uh, from bottom up ya, physics, material science, uh, device hingga system level ya. Tapi kecenderungan industri sekarang sepertinya masih susah untuk pindah dari silikon. Jadi misalkan teman-teman bermain dengan different ideas of materials, devices, try to think about integrated to silicon process. Kalau tidak bakal stay di lab. Kecuali memang teknologi yang sifatnya need to be high performance. Kayak for space or military applications, you need to stay without silicon. Tapi kalau misalkan untuk teknologi yang widespread, coba untuk try to think about integrate to silicon. Terus yang saya sampaikan tadi hanya sedikit teknik, tentu saja banyak sekali yang lain yang tidak saya cover dan saya belum punya kesempatan untuk mempelajarinya. Um, Misalkan sangat banyak sekali progres di silicon photonics di great buffers walaupun sangat thick tapi people try to make it more effective. Terus juga beberapa group reported embracing the defects jadi sangat menarik progresnya. Tapi main pointnya I know you guys working on different levels, different systems. If you want to get more impact, try to think about integrated to silicon. Ya, terima kasih. Kira-kira seperti itu, teman-teman. Terima kasih atas waktunya.
Oke. Baik, terima kasih Pak Gali atas waktu dan materi dan ilmu yang sangat bermanfaat. Oke, kita ke sesi selanjutnya, pengumuman pemenang door prize kita. Ya, pemenang door prize hari ini adalah Pak Joko. Selamat atas door prize-nya, tolong nanti agak stay. Nanti kami akan eh, mengumumkan di mana untuk menerima hadiahnya. Oke, untuk sebelum menutup sesi hari ini, saya ingin promosi sebentar terkait terkait eh, kami, jasa penelitian kami. Jadi dari Nano Center Indonesia menawarkan jasa penanuan dan pengujian, di mana jasa Nano Center Indonesia melayani jasa penggilingan atau pengurusan dan penanuan material apapun itu, baik itu ekstrak, herbal, atau multiplisia ataupun bahan lainnya. Kami menawarkan layanan yang profesional dengan performa alat yang maksimal dan pengerjaan yang tepat waktu untuk memenuhi kebutuhan Anda. Dan kami juga menawarkan berbagai metode karakterisasi mulai dari karakterisasi XRD, PSA Micro, BET, SEM, Coating SEM, dan juga SEMIDX dan TJA DSC dari hasil penanuan dan pengujian tersebut. Untuk keterangan lebih lanjut bisa menghubungi nomor WhatsApp yang tertera. Dari Nanotech Indonesia Global juga melayani jasa pengujian dan analisa sampel, di mana PT Nanotech Indonesia Global Tbk menyediakan jasa pengujian dan analisa untuk hasil yang reliable dengan harga yang terjangkau. Adapun alat yang terdapat di fasilitas kami yakni particle size analyzer, FTIR spectrometer, Raman imaging microscope, dan juga jasa pembuatan material nanofiber menggunakan alat electrospinning. Dan terlebih lagi, berita bagus lainnya yaitu seluruh peserta pada Nanotalks hari ini mendapatkan diskon 10% untuk jasa penanuan di Nano Center Indonesia. Dan juga untuk link absensi untuk mendapatkan e-sertifikat dapat diabsen melalui link berikut atau dapat diakses juga melalui link yang dibagikan di chat. Jadi sebelum selesai selesai materi hari ini bisa diakses dulu linknya untuk melakukan absensi. Dan juga info lebih lanjut dapat dicek melalui kanal YouTube kami di Scientix dan juga page Instagram kami nanocenterindonesia.id dan juga Nanotech Global Indonesia ataupun dapat diakses melalui website kami di nanocenter.id dan ndg.co.id. Lebih kurangnya saya minta maaf atas segala kekurangan yang terdapat pada webinar Nanotalk hari ini. Eh, lebih kurangnya saya mohon maaf. Terima kasih atas kesempatannya. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih banyak Nanotalks, Nano Center, Pak Ramel, terima kasih banyak.
Iya,
Maaf ya, makasih.
sama-sama Gali. Saya selalu dengan quantum solution-nya.
Ya, sukses selalu Pak.
Iya, makasih ya
Terima kasih.
sudah menghadiri acara kami.
Terima kasih banyak.
Iya, mari.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.